Welcome to Crossroads Fine Woodworking, where we're going to make a modern coat rack today. This is a class that was taught in 2026, and these two ladies are learning how to make a modern coat rack. They're picking out contrasting hardwoods for the aesthetics of the coat rack. They both picked walnut and red oak as their contrasting hardwoods. And our next step, since this is surfaced on two sides already, is to rip the hardwoods to the appropriate width. The width is going to be determined by the overall style that you would like, and we're going to do that over on the table saw, which will be our next step. At this point, we're all getting a feel for each other and deciding if we're going to be able to get along today. As it turns out, they ended up being a ton of fun, and we had a great time all day. So we head on over to the table saw. I'm adjusting the height of the blade on the table saw so that the throat of each of the teeth on the table saw is just shy of the top of the board. That's the appropriate height for the saw blade to be. And then I'm instructing them on the use of these unique products that are for safety. There's so many options for safety now, and we don't have to keep worrying about losing fingers and losing hands because we're able to keep our hands far away from the blade. So these yellow products that you see right here are made by Microjig. They're the Gripper series, and they keep your fingers and hands far away from the blade. There's one part of the grip that's on the fence side of the saw blade and one part that's on the waste side, and you're able to keep firm control of the board as it gets pushed through without putting your fingers in harm's way at all. So we've cut the walnut. Now we're going to mill the oak to the appropriate width and head on back to do some sanding. So many of you might think it odd that we would be sanding at this point when we're nowhere near to assembly, but we do want to sand these pieces before they become really small pieces. It's much easier to sand the larger pieces. So it's already milled so that it has been to what would be equivalent to a 150 grit. We're going to now go to a 180 grit sandpaper on a random orbital sander, and you can see that they're pairing the boards together. That gives a wider base to support the sander so that you're having a nice flat sanding surface. They're sanding all four sides of this before we head off to start doing some cross-cutting, because we're going to end up milling these into some unique shapes and sizes. At this point, we've decided we're going to get along fine, and in fact, I'm going to give them a hard time. You'll see laughing, and guess what? They're going to give me a hard time right back. It was a great relationship that we had through this whole thing. In this section, we're going to cross-cut or form our smaller blocks that we're going to end up milling into the correct shapes. So in the crosscut, what we're going to do is take a long board and turn it into 5-inch pieces. There's a stop block already installed on the crosscut, and on this miter saw, what we're going to do is start the blade running. We're going to make the cut. We're going to let the blade come to a complete stop before we lift up the miter saw, and that's going to prevent kickback. The blade needs to come to a complete stop, or else it will grab the small pieces that we're cutting and it will throw them into the air. So now we continue with our cross-cuts. We're cross-cutting 5-inch pieces of board, and we're making a stack of those, as you can see in their carts, both of the walnut and of the oak. So these 5-inch pieces are going to be further refined into the portions of the coat rack that pull out, that you hang the coat on, and the portion that acts as the stable background. And that's where the contrasting colors will become really something beautiful that you'll come to appreciate. We'll see that in just a little bit. On one of the cross cuts, the board was not pushed all the way up against the stop block, and we needed to make another piece of material ripped to the correct size to have one additional component. I won't say which one of these two did not have their board pushed all the way up against the stop block, but I will say that the guy who was supposed to be monitoring it failed at his job. So, measure twice, cut once. As it turns out, measuring twice and cutting once is some pretty good advice. I should take my own advice. So on this crosscut sled, you can see there's a handle to keep hands and fingers away. I'm adjusting the height of the blade again, and we're putting our small pieces and we're clamping them into the crosscut sled to create a tapered cut along the course. It helps to plug in the table saw. All right, there is a tapered cut being made, and we're able now to repeat that same process with all the walnut pieces, resulting in the first part of the milling of our coat hangers. All right, we are going to head off now to the drill press, where we're going to use another jig. This jig drills holes in the sides of the components of the coat hanger rack. There is a chance that it is not perfectly centered, and well, I'll own that one. That's probably my fault if that's the case. So we're marking which side is facing to the back of the jig, and we're going to line up those sides once we assemble this all together. And I think it will make more sense once you see what we're doing. With this particular type of setup with the jig, you will get a lot of sawdust, and if you don't keep that clean, it's going to make the pieces not fit in well. So, and it will make the holes that you are producing all at a different level. So just keep your jig nice and clean, and I think that you'll find that you get really consistent results again. So you can see now that I stripped out the piece that was holding the jig and allowing it to clamp down on the underside of the board, and we're going to need to do something to either fix that or else hold on to the clamp down so that it can hold the piece squarely down. I'm calling for help, and we've come up with the most logical solution, and that is to improvise. So I'm going to grab a pair of pliers, or if you're from Kentucky, you can say pliers, and hold on to the threaded post so that she can actually tighten this down well. Nonetheless, we have improvised and we have found a way to get through. So the contrasting pieces of wood are going to have holes at different levels, and that is going to create a zigzag sort of pattern when we assemble all of this together. The first thing that we're doing is putting holes in through the width of the board, and those were on the stable pieces. Now we're going to go ahead and put the holes in on the actual coat hangers. There's two different stops here. The one that sticks up higher is for when we turn the boards on edge and we're drilling across that way. The shorter one, which is what we're using right now, is for drilling through the coat hangers, and that will produce the zigzag pattern just from this one particular jig. Oh, I'm watching now, Ben, at about the 15-minute mark. And there's a fair amount of discussion now happening. I don't know why we have to discuss things. Why can't we just go ahead and drill the holes through things? But this dear friend She needed everything absolutely perfect, and she was questioning some of my techniques right here. And as an architect, I imagine she has every right to do that. Nonetheless, I wouldn't back down because, well, it became a battle of two wills. And ultimately, we decided that since it's my shop, she's going to do it my way. I say all this very tongue in cheek. Once again, these two were just the best to work with. In this part, we're going to ease the sharp edge that the coats will actually hang on, and for that we're going to use the oscillating edge sander. I hope you enjoyed the quick video of our vacuum system, and hopefully it's working right now because this produces a lot of dust. It was very important that all of the eased edges look exactly the same to some people. I encouraged them that really wasn't that necessary, but apparently they are much more of a perfectionist than I am. So, the oscillating edge sander was used to ease the sharp edge on the side that's going to be hanging the coat so as not to destroy their coats. My particular coats I've had for probably over 30 years, and really nothing's going to destroy them at this point if they've survived that long. That's a boomer move. You're welcome. So we're finally going to begin assembling things here, and these individual pieces that we've made are all going to fit on a 3/8 inch dowel rod. The holes that we've made are just over 3/8 inch, barely over, and there's going to be some friction. So we're going to help control that friction by utilizing a technique I've done for a long time with a bar of dial soap and chucking the dowel rods into the drill, pulling them across the dial soap, and lubricating the surface of that. That allows these pieces to move more freely and not squeak all the time. Now, you don't have to use dial soap. You could also use one of those smelly soaps if you are into that type of thing. And that's where we're going to have a brief pause and a little advice. If your significant other wants to go ahead and use these or take you to one of these places where they have the smelly soaps and the smelly candles, you have two choices. You can go with, and it would seem like that's the right move, but the truth is they don't want you there complaining the entire time. So go ahead and find yourself a nice little place you can sit down and watch a baseball game or a football game instead. If you're new to woodworking, you know that the pieces, in order for them to turn out nice, have to be pretty smooth, and you can see sanding on top of sanding on top of sanding happens. We try to make this as easy as possible, but sometimes you're at the point where you have to do a little hand sanding. So that's where these ladies are right now. They are hand sanding the little holes that we made, getting rid of the little burrs so that all of this assembles nicely, and they're getting it prepped for ultimately putting the finish on these individual pieces, stringing them all together, and making it look like a completed project. This actually, instead of a cross cut, which it is a type, is actually a dadoing process. And so we want these different arms of our coat hanger rack to come out and stop. We don't want them to come out so far that the coat just falls off. And utilizing a dadoing blade, we're able to create a piece that's going to go behind these and limit how far they can come out. What they are doing with this dadoing blade is utilizing a crosscut sled. And the crosscut sled allows them to exactly line up where their cuts are going to be and dado out or remove out a bunch of material, creating this zigzag sort of a pattern. And as we assemble this, I think you'll see how that fits in and allows these pieces to open up, but open up and then stop and not go too far. You reach a point where you have to turn the piece around, still utilizing the marks that were put on there, and finish your crosscut dado. These have been made just a little bit long so they can be trimmed down to size depending on the final assembled width of the coat hanger. The blue tape on the crosscut sled has a warning sign saying fingers on the other side of this. And the point is always keep your fingers away from the working surface or the working edge of any machinery that does cutting or shaping. If you had to choose to have your fingers cut off by anything though, choose a machine that cuts and doesn't shape, because the cutting usually leaves a nice edge that you can sew back on, whereas a shaper like a router bit just eats the whole thing up, and you really don't have any choice except to maybe sew on a piece of wood shaped like a finger. Disclaimer: Crossroads Fine Woodworking does not give medical advice. Prior to finishing any project, you should always dry fit and make sure the pieces are fitting together well. You can see now as it's coming together, they've got two backing strips, and those two backing strips are going to hold everything together. There's been a keyhole placed in the end caps of the coat hanger wire, and I'm showing them how to position the dadoed piece so that it allows the coat hangers to pull out but then stop. They're marking these, and the reason that they're marking these is they don't want to get finished material on there, since we're going to end up gluing it. The pieces have now been finished with a hard wax finish and allowed to dry overnight. We will now assemble them, and unique in our assembly process here is that the stretchers have been trimmed to the appropriate length. They're going to be held in place with two different glues. One is with a CA glue that's going to act almost as a clamp, and the other one is traditional wood glue. We've kept some areas on the back side of each of the pre-made oak pieces free of finish, so that they can be glued wood to wood and not have to worry about the finish in between. The dadoed piece is going to be glued also in the same fashion, in such a way to allow the coat hangers to come out and then stop prior to going too far. And this is what the finished assembled project looks like. I hope you have enjoyed this video and are eager to learn how to make a modern two-tone coat rack. If you would like, you can come to Crossroads Fine Woodworking. Go to the website, crossroadsfinewoodworking.com/pages/classes, and sign up for the next class, and we'll help you make one too.